women and for children and for boys and for those who have been exploited, the vulnerable. And although sometimes it seems like all of our efforts aren't making very big strides, hers are. And so I am so honored to be able to interview you and to talk to you about this, Dottie. Thank you so much for your life's work.
Thank you. It is an honor to be here. Thank you for this opportunity to spend some time with you.
Yay. Well, you have been, you have worked with two attorney generals, one being my little cousin.
That is so cool.
Ashley Moody.
Yes.
And that has been one, that she had two platforms going into the election. And, you know, one of them was Big Pharma,
right,
and one of them was human trafficking.
That's
and
right.
that after being a judge and seeing so much in juvenile court,
yes,
she said, I've got to do something about it. And so you, too, through HeartDance, through the Homeland Security position, through all these different things, you, too, have said, I've got to do something about it.
Yes.
But before we go to this passion calling, let's go back to your love story. Because, you know, we're women, right? We all want to start with, you know, a love story. Tell me about your husband, about your family.
Yes, my husband and I are childhood, you know, high school sweethearts, and we graduated. I went off to Mercer University in Macon, Georgia, and he decided to go into boot camp, into the military. And so on his way to boot camp, he came by the university to see me, and I ended up breaking up with him that night.
Dottie!
I know, but it gets even worse. Little did I know he was going to propose to me that night, and he ended up throwing my engagement ring in the Mississippi River. And I did not know about it for 37 years.
Wow.
I found out I was actually going through a divorce 37 years later with my former husband. And but before Facebook, there was something called classmates.com. So he found me on classmates.com, reconnected, emailed with me. I almost fell off of my chair because he truly has always been the love of my life.
Aww.
And we talked for 2 or 3 months via email before I got the nerve to say, okay, you can call me on the phone. And then I guess it was probably 6 months later and after my divorce went through that we met in person, and we picked up where we left off, sparks flying. And anyway, it's quite a story. We've been married now for 13 years.
And you have how many children?
We have 7 children.
That's wonderful.
I have 4 beautiful bonus children, 6 sons,
wow,
and 1 daughter. So there's always a lot of drama.
I'm a boy mom, I understand.
Yes.
You got 1 girl, that's awesome.
That's right, and she's the oldest, so she's like the mother hen to everybody else.
She keeps everyone in line.
She does.
Cracks the whip, right?
She does, yes. Oh. But Roger is definitely the wind beneath my wings, and really is, I think, why I can sustain the work that I do, since having him back in my life now, he helps me to soar. Yeah. There's no question. Yeah.
Well, isn't God faithful that he brings things full circle and he restores?
Yes.
And he just brings beauty for ashes in our lives if we don't give up.
He does.
And if we stand.
That's right.
So
That's right.
I love that part of your story. So you have this amazing family that support you in this calling. You are a missionary, you're an ordained elder.
Correct.
So you work in ministry, you're a corporate woman for years. So tell us about the transition where you knew, I've got to transition out of the corporate world and start HeartDance and do this full time.
Yes, I started HeartDance about, 2008. But even going back further than that, it was over 40 years ago that I believe was the time when the Lord really plucked a string in my heart. I was teaching self-esteem classes in the most marginalized areas of Tampa Bay, and there was a 13-year-old girl and a 4-year-old, a 13-year-old girl who wanted to bring her 4-year-old sister to the next class. And I said, great, because this 13-year-old had so much anger in her, you know, throwing chairs across the room and things I just was not equipped to deal with at time. So I said, yes, bring your little sister. Well, she brought her little sister, and you know sometimes how you just know that you know that you know that something isn't right. And I know it was the Holy Spirit nudging me.
Yes.
And it conflicted me so much that I asked the housing authority who had hired me to let's find out about these girls' lives. Let's look into where they live, their background. To make a long story short, the 13-year-old and her 4-year-old sister lived with their grandmother, who was selling both of them on the street every night in exchange for drugs. And to make it even more horrific, and it's still 40 years later, gets to me, the little 4-year-old had a sexually transmitted disease. And I can't tell you how that shook me to the core. I didn't know what to do with it. It was human trafficking, but there was no label of human trafficking back then.
Yeah.
So that was, I think, when the Lord really plucked a string in my heart. I was working in the corporate world then, but He plucked that string in my heart, and I started volunteering at sexual assault centers and things along those lines. And then, I was still working on the corporate world in 2008, and I just very clearly heard Him say, you need to just let all of that go. And your husband, he was working for the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office at that time, so wasn't making a killing financially, but he said, you have to trust me. And Roger and I talked about it, and he said, if you heard so clearly from the Lord that you're supposed to step away from the corporate world and start a ministry, that the sole mission of the ministry is to go into the strip clubs in Tampa Bay and minister to the women in the clubs. So I did. I'm, what, Lord? What? You want me? I grew up in the Beaver Cleaver household, and for those who are too young to know what that is, it was just squeaky clean, amazing, happy Christian family who had never experienced anything like that before. So I guess I just wanted to be obedient to what I felt the Lord was calling me to do. So I left my corporate job and opened this ministry. It started through the Underground Network here in Tampa, and now we're on our own. But that's how HeartDance came to be.